Hi and welcome to Pontus Points. Today we are going to talk about the last day of capitalism. This is an expression a very close relative of mine used a few days ago, and I'm really keen to kind of dig into it and see what it is and if it's right or if it's wrong. So, The Last Day of Capitalism is a movie. There are several expressions to describe the same thing: late stage capitalism, late capitalism, or end stage capitalism. It's basically a term used by people who oppose capitalism to say that it's about to die. So you would rarely hear people use it if they like capitalism as a concept. Let's assume that there is a point to this. What would be the options to capitalism? And for me, I'm using capitalism and market economy basically as sort of equivalents here. So if I'm not fully correct on that, then blame me for that. But that's what I'll be using henceforward. So communism is probably the alternative that you can bring about as an argument against capitalism. And most people who are opposing capitalism are promoting communism. So in theory, communism is a beautiful system, but in practice, not so much. If we look at the places where it's been tried, it has never been tried in combination with a full democracy. So basically, you need an autocracy in order to maintain a communist system. Prove me wrong. Point at any examples that tells you otherwise. But for me, I have never found any other alternatives except autocracies. And why would that be? Well, first of all, we have a number of defining factors with us as humans, and not all of them are favorable and polite and noble. If you take stuff like greed, selfishness, and lust for power, these are never said like in a positive context. Well, of course, greed is good if you're talking about the Gordon Gekko quote. But if you take those three examples and look at capitalism use these three to promote the livelihood of all the inhabitants. It uses the power of these three sources, three natively kind of not so nice sources, for something that is beneficial for everybody. Communism is trying to combat all three of them, and that's why it's failing. If you work for yourself, you put in more effort. You can call that greed, but you put in more effort. And if you put in more effort, then you could have spillover effect that is beneficial also for others. On the other hand, if you look at dictatorship of the proletariat, that is one of the phases before the society becomes fully mature communist society. No progression has ever kind of moved across that, because there is a lust for power. So if somebody is in power in this dictatorship of the proletariat, it never moves on. It stays there. It becomes an authoritarian and inefficient system. So that's why I'm totally against communism as a system, because it doesn't work and it's never going to work for obvious reasons. So why is this state late? Well, I mean, if you look at where we are, We've had capitalist crashes several times. 1929 in the US, you had the big crash. You had a bank crash in most of Europe during the 80s, and a number of other instances where the capitalist system sort of crashed, but it's back up. So it's like a machine. A machine eventually fails, but as long as you can restart it and it starts again, we're all good. We're all good. So basically, there are no indicatives that this is actually the late stage. And also, if you look at the the expression, it's basically coined over 100 years ago. 100 years ago. So it's from 1902. And already then, somebody found it worthwhile to coin an expression to call that stage of capitalism as late. But it's alive now 100 years later, so was it really late then? Is it really late now? I'd say it's absolutely convincingly no, it was late then, because it's still alive now. But why would it be late now? Why isn't it sort of the end of the beginning or mid of the reign of capitalism? I don't see any argument against that. And also, one of the arguments against market economy is that companies today are so big that you cannot compete with them. But that is missing a great number of relevant points. First of all, we have rules against monopolies, and the negative thing that can happen in a market economy, or one of the negative parts, is that somebody will become so dominant in their relevant market that you cannot compete with them. And competition is the driving force behind market economy. But we have rules against that. First of all, monopolies cannot be formed by buying competitors to the point where the consolidated company is so big that it's a monopoly. There are, in every known country on the globe, regulators that would say no to a company buying another company so that consolidated company would become a monopoly. And if one of the companies wanting to buy another company is already a monopoly, then don't waste your time. You will not be allowed to buy that other company. And also, if monopolies are sort of formed naturally by somebody growing so fast and taking over their entire market, there are regulations for abuse of dominant market positions. So if you are in that strong position, there are rules in place that prevents you from doing or basically abusing that position. I personally work in telecom, and there is typically at least one mobile operator or one telecom operators in every country that had that dominant market position. And special rules were enforced on those to ensure that, to some extent at least, level the playing field for newcomers so that they would also be able to compete. And also, markets are not static here. If you look at the Fortune 500, that is the top 500 companies on the planet, rather few of those are more than 50 years old. Actually, only 8 of these Fortune 500 are 100 years old. So that means that even if the biggest companies on the planet were very, very dominant in their respective market, that has still changed because of a number of factors. If you look at those factors, I mean, many of the world's biggest companies are still the oil companies, but we are less and less reliant on fossil fuels, so they are shrinking by general market trends. They need to do something else because fossil energy is not the future, and that means that their core will be eroded to something that they can no longer live on in the near future. So markets are changing. Markets are not static. General Motors and Ford were two of the top 3 companies globally. No longer the case. They are not even the biggest car manufacturers. None of them are. Toyota is the biggest car manufacturer. And if you look at companies producing electric cars, they are skyrocketing into becoming really significant players. And I tend to mention Tesla a number of times. If you look at where Tesla is growing, they were nothing a few years ago. And now they are one of the more significant car manufacturers on the globe. So it is possible to start with a new idea and compete with that if you just have the passion and people believing in your idea. Microsoft owned the tech space 20 years ago. Windows and the Office suite was the thing because everybody was using a desktop computer. Everybody using a desktop was running Microsoft Windows on it, and most of the people were also using Microsoft Office on top of the Windows system. With the advent of mobile, not so much. If you look at the install base of OS, Microsoft is no longer the biggest one. There are a lot more players on the market because the market changed from being desktop to being mobile. Markets change. Markets are not static. 20 years ago, record companies were controlling the entire distribution of music. Not anymore. Not anymore. Now we have streaming services. They are the most prominent distribution mechanisms for new music. And the record companies' relevance on the relevant market is shrinking. Moving from retail into online has made a number of the retail chains going down, down, down. Even the really significant ones would now see people like Amazon showing up. And Amazon wasn't around a few decades ago. It's a really new player. So I think this late stage of capitalism is sort of a hope from somebody having faith in communism for solving issues that they see in the capitalist system. But I'm sorry to say that there are no signs that capitalism will die anytime soon. It looks like a survivor. It looks like one of those systems that would just, you can try to squash it, you can try to kill it, but it will still be around. Even in pockets of the harshest communism, authoritarian regimes, you would find market economy because eventually the state cannot control everything. And if the state does not control it, there will be a market. So I'd say market economy is a very natural way for people to act. When they have resources and they have needs, they use their resources to fulfill their needs. And in exchange, they need to contribute with something that somebody else would like to procure. That is the entire basis of market economy. And if you believe in communism, I'm sorry to say that you can never, ever win. Because there are driving forces that talks for market economy, and there are those that talk against communism. You cannot win. So give up, realize that market economy is the way to go. Democracy and market economy where people choose is the way forward. All the best.